Previously on Pretty Little Liars.
Hi guys, it's
Lauren Daisy.
Welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing a video that I'm actually really excited about because I love stuff like this. I love looking at the sets and if they match the characters and the vibes and what do the colors mean and all that stuff. I just absolutely love it. I love the attention to detail. I think the set designers for shows are incredibly underrated and I just think it is so much fun to look at. So today we're going to be looking at every single house in Pretty Little Liars. So yeah, we're going to be looking at all of the Liars houses today. I'm super excited. We're going to obviously look at Alison's, Aria's, Spencer's, Hannah's, Emily's, and we're also going to have a little look at Mona's. So I think it's going to be really fun. So what are we actually looking at? So we're going to be looking at the exterior of the house. We're going to be looking at all the different rooms that we end up seeing. So whether we see any parents' rooms, the kitchen, the living room, the dining room, siblings' bedrooms, bathrooms, absolutely everything. And it's going to be so much fun. I literally have so much written down and I hope you guys find it as interesting as I do. And obviously the big one is we're going to be looking at each of the Liars' bedrooms as well, looking at the colour schemes, looking at the things that they put in their rooms and do their rooms match their characters, and I just think it's going to be fun. It's a different kind of video, but I'm excited about it. So yeah, hopefully you guys find it interesting and let's get into it. So we're going to start with my personal favourite liar. We're going to start with Aria Montgomery, and the Montgomerys live at 301 Sunnybrook Lane, Rosewood, Pennsylvania, 19387. So first we'll look at the exterior, and I really like the exterior of Aria's house, like with the steps up to the porch and like when we see that scene of her and Emily and they're sitting on the porch swing together in the pilot. I just thought it was just a really like lovely family home vibe. And we actually, after the pilot, don't see the exterior of Aria's house really ever. We just see her like opening the door from the inside. And this is because when they filmed the pilot, they filmed it in Vancouver. And so they used a house that was there in Vancouver as the exterior. And then when the show moved to the Warner Brothers lot over in California, they then obviously didn't have access to that house anymore. And Aria's house became more of just an interior set than anything exterior, like how we still see lots of Spencer's house and Hannah's house. It's because they are on the Warner Brothers lot. So moving on to the living room, the floor plan layout of the Montgomery house is a little bit of a mystery because we actually see kind of two versions of it. I don't really know why this is. I couldn't find anything about it online, but originally for seasons, I think it's 1, 2, I don't think it's 3. I think it had changed in 3. So like seasons 1 and 2, we have the living room that leads through like this big arch into the dining room kitchen. Like it's like a big kind of open plan sort of downstairs with the steps in the middle kind of in line with the front door. But then as the show goes on, we have her front door leading like directly into her dining table. I don't think we ever see her kitchen again aside from like season 1 and season 2. So I don't know why this was changed, but it was. So we're going to have a little look at both of them. So if we look at the original living room first, to be fair, the actual design doesn't really change. Like they moved a lot of the same furniture and the same little accessories from that living room into the changed one. It's more just the kind of layout that changes rather than the decoration. Oh, I also had mentioned I'm also going to be ranking the houses at the end from my least favorite to favorite. So let me know what you think of my ranking, and then you can tell me in the comments like which house is your favorite. So we have a lot of dark wood in the Montgomery house and I just adore it. Like spoiler alert for my ranking, but it's everything. I love the design of this house. I love like the wood and the just cozy homey vibe that it has. So yeah, to me, out of all the houses, the Montgomery house feels the most homey. It's cozy. It's, proper like family vibes, which is kind of ironic considering like the fact that their family kind of explodes in the first season. But yeah, I think their house does definitely reflect like a very cohesive family unit. The Montgomerys to me always feel like the most relatable family. They aren't like super wealthy like the Hastings. You know, they feel like the way they interact with each other, it just like feels like a real family. And I feel like they kind of feel as though you could actually have them as neighbors, like just the Montgomerys that live next door, rather than, you know, the Hastings or the De Laurentises. They felt real, and I think their house reflects that as well. Oh my god, there is a huge squirrel outside. Oh, don't leave. Oh, he is so precious. We also have a lot of family photos and more like sentimental items in the Montgomery house, and their photos are more candid, casual, the kind of photos that families would actually take of each other, and like, you know, childhood photos and things. Whereas in the other houses, if we do see family photos, like in the Fields house, they're very like photo shoot style. They're very, oh, everyone's together, everyone like pose, everyone smile. Whereas these feel more like ones they just took of them as kids and liked, so they put them up on the wall. And also they're in like mismatched frames. They're kind of all over the place. I just really like it. We also know that the Montgomerys really like traveling, and I also think that is reflected in their house. They have a lot of items that feel like they could have been collected while they were traveling, or that they got secondhand to kind of add more character to their home. The Montgomerys also love clutter, and I love them for it. If anyone plays like The Sims, that is my favorite category in The Sims. I will, you know, do my little house, and then I'll be like, clutter. I want clutter everywhere. I want clocks, I want candles, I want, you know, little bits of makeup, like nail polish, everything. I love it. So that's definitely the vibe in the Montgomery house. We have candles, different like vases that look like they've been collected from anywhere, like not everything matches. We've got different pillows, we've got books, we've got knickknacks, and I love it. And it all looks really natural in their house. Everything is a little bit different, everything's a little bit quirky, and that's kind of what the Montgomerys are like. So yeah, like I said, the updated living room is pretty similar. It's the exact same kind of design style, but like I said, instead of it leading through to the dining room and the kitchen, it now just leads to like a kind of entryway with a desk. And I love the warm lighting of the Montgomery house. I feel like some of the other houses, they can have quite like cold lighting, like more like blue tone lighting, and I feel like the Montgomery house, with that like warm wood and the warm lights, the more like yellow toned lights, again, it just makes it feel cozy. It makes it feel like welcoming. And I also feel like we see the Liars hang out here quite a bit as well in the living room and in Aria's room. It just makes it feel more like casual and laid back, and like they feel comfortable to be over there. And this is kind of similar to the Montgomery parenting style as well. The way they parent Aria is, you know, it is casual, it is laid back, it is more letting her kind of be herself and express herself and do the things that she wants to do. So it makes sense that their house isn't very strict and tidy and regimented. We've got like blankets and cushions and things that look like they actually get used, and furniture that looks like you would actually want to sit on it. And I think the focus of brown on the Montgomery house kind of reflects the feelings of the house, like I've been saying. Brown kind of represents relaxation, it's casual and kind of has a more of a genuine feeling to it, like the color brown. And it can also represent endurance, and I think the Montgomerys as a family unit definitely endure a lot in that house across the seasons, specifically like the first two. And if you want to get like proper in depth about it, I suppose as well, you could, not that I haven't been going in depth, because it's like you guys are probably watching this like, how did you get this from a living room? But walk with me here. You could also kind of look at the darker tones of the Montgomery house, reflecting the like darker underbelly of the Montgomery family. They, on the surface, look like this kind of like picture perfect, like wave at them over the fence neighbors. But then you have the affair with Byron and Ella. You have Aria in this secret relationship with her teacher, and Mike struggling with his parents' divorce and kind of struggling with his mental health, and then he ends up like, you know, like stealing and stuff. You have all this stuff kind of under the surface that we don't see on the outside of what they're like kind of showing to the rest of the world, because I think a lot of them we don't really hear them talk about stuff, and I think Aria, out of all the liars, is definitely the one that shares the least about what's going on in her life. So then if we move on to the dining room again, we have, you know, family photos in mismatched frames, different tones of wood. It's all very just kind of, we like this, so we're going to put it up kind of vibes. They also have a sort of like mini bar kind of area behind the table, which lines up with, we see Ella drinking wine quite a bit in the show, and I think Byron also drinks whiskey quite a bit, so that kind of lines up. And it also, I think, shows trust within the Montgomery house. Like I said, the parenting style is quite laid back. It's more casual and trusting of their children, so they are happy to leave these things out, trusting that Mike and Aria aren't going to abuse that trust and like steal the alcohol or drink it. Whereas everywhere else it's kind of like hidden or like in cabinets in the other houses and stuff, or you don't even see it. So I think that's kind of interesting as well. They also have 2 dining tables for some reason, which feels a bit overkill. They have like the big long one, and then they also have like a smaller circle one when they kind of like have breakfast and stuff. But then they do have breakfast at the long end, the long table, so I don't really know why they have 2, but they have 2. And they have like dark play sets and bowls, like kind of, yeah, like I said, keeping to that darker kind of color scheme of the whole house. So moving on to the kitchen, and like I said, we don't see the kitchen very often, but from what we do see of it, they have, you know, cooked breakfast together and they eat dinner together as a family, further pushing that family style of their home, which, I mean, we don't see Ashley and Hannah eat together that much, really. If they do, they're having like takeout. And the Hastings, I don't think we ever see them eat together unless it's like at a restaurant. And their kitchen looks like a kitchen that is actually used by somebody. They have oils, they have seasoning, fresh veg, mixing bowls, you know, frying pans and utensils, all that kind of stuff. That actually makes it look like, oh, this family cooks here. And I also really liked that not everything matches. I think in a lot of the other houses we see all the plates are white, or all the like plates look like this and everything's pristine. And here we have, you know, mismatched mugs. We've got patterned mugs. We've got some wooden things, but also some plastic things that they've kind of like collected along the way. And everything doesn't have to come from a specific set. So now we're looking at Aria's bedroom, which I have always adored Aria's bedroom and wanted my room to look like hers. I just thought it was so gorgeous growing up, and even now I still love it, like with the dark wood, and she's got all these like cute little keepsakes in there. She's got little Russian nesting dolls, and it feels lived in and it feels like hers. It's quite vintage, it's quite artsy. There's all kind of like little bits of her personality in this room, which I really like. You know, we have like her desk area, and she has her notepads and her books just kind of like thrown on top, and she has, you know, stacks of books everywhere, not really in any specific order, just kind of how she is like reading them. We also see she has like Pigtunia on the desk, which is from the books, and also like in the series, her cute little pig puppet. So we know that she's not really like, oh, this has to be a grown-up room or any kind of like expectations on it. She's just, this is my stuff and I'll just put it absolutely anywhere. There's no rhyme or reason to this room whatsoever. And she has childhood photos, which are actually really cute. If you ever notice in the show, if you ever see childhood photos, they usually will always use actual like real childhood photos of the actors, which is sweet. And things on her desk kind of change, but 2 of my favorite things that they did, she had like a bunch of like sunflowers on there one time, and then she also for a little while had a canvas with like a painting that she was kind of like halfway through doing on there. And I just thought those were like really like cute little touches that they added in. Now, if you know me, I love a window seat. I dream of having a window seat. So I love Aria's window seat. It's covered in pillows and books. And again, it just feels like so lived in, and like you can just see her sitting there with like a coffee or hot chocolate or whatever, just reading her books in her window seat. Just vibes, just absolute vibes. And like I said, I think her room reflects her personal style. I think with the way Byron and Ella parent, they definitely would have just let her decorate it however she wanted to kind of express herself. You know, we see her kind of hobbies are represented with her like artistic side and reading. You know, we see that come through as well as like some of her fashion sense, I think, kind of comes through in the room as well. We have a lot of like the colors that show up in her room also show up in her outfits, and we see a lot of different textures and patterns, which again is something that we see in her clothes. She's got patterns on everything, like she wears the leopard print. I think she's, you know, she's worn lightning bolts, she's worn all kinds of stuff, and we see patterns like that in her room, like on her lampshade and her wallpaper and her pillows. On the wall, she also has pictures up of like different buildings and places, and they kind of look like pictures that could have been taken by her, especially later in the show when they get more into her photography stuff. That vibe that she takes pictures of kind of matches with the pictures that are in her room, so it looks like she took them and she put them up, which I really liked. I also noticed that she has quite a lot of like butterflies in her room, which wasn't something I really associated with Aria, to be fair. But she's got them like on her walls and kind of on her desk and things like that. And if we're kind of like looking for a deeper meaning, I feel like maybe it could show that Aria, she's mentioned before that she didn't really know who she was, like that's why she had her pink hair. So I feel like maybe she's kind of like the butterfly in that sense, like she was kind of in her cocoon for a little bit longer than everybody else, realizing, you know, who she was. I don't really know, because I feel like Spencer and Emily, and obviously they were all kind of struggling, but like in terms of like aesthetic, they don't change much from like, I mean, Hannah does, but from like the flashbacks to now, whereas Aria definitely has a very different vibe than she did in the flashbacks. Out of all the lies, I would say Hannah and Aria probably have the most like bolder makeup and, you know, like bolder nail polishes and things. So I feel like her having this like edgy, cute little makeup bag fits her really well. And she has, you know, her vanity where she gets ready, so she has all her like accessories and stuff there, which I thought was really cute. And then lastly, in her room, she also has like this comfy armchair that they use quite a bit, and she has her closet wardrobe at the back with all her like dresses and stuff, and it's all messy in there with like a laundry basket that's kind of overflowing. And again, I just feel like the room feels realistic, it feels lived in. And it kind of shows, again, that they aren't in that same financial bracket as like the Hastings and the De Laurentises. Like numerous times in this show, we see them doing their own laundry. We see them like having, Aria looks like she, like thrifts, or she has secondhand pieces and all that kind of stuff. It is not perfectly all like organized and arranged like some of the other houses, who probably have like cleaners and stuff, I would assume. So moving on from Aria's room, across the hall and down a little bit to the left, we have Mike's room. And he's actually the only sibling in this show where we get to see their room. His room is a fun set as well, because it's the one of the only times that we get to see like the Pretty Little Liars set design team's vision of like a teenage boy's room as opposed to a teenage girl's room. Like we don't see Toby or Caleb, I don't think, and like obviously Ezra's a man, like he lives in an apartment, so it's not really the same vibe. And yeah, I think the only other time we see like a teenage boy's room is Lucas's room. I think we see Lucas's room, and his is obviously kind of like the polar opposite of Mike's, with his being a more like stereotypical nerdy room, I suppose. It's got like memorabilia and action figures and all that kind of stuff, while Mike's room kind of represents more of that jock, rebellious brother type of teenage boy. I feel like with Mike's room, we're kind of naturally leaning into more gender stereotypes. We have a lot of like blue in his room, like his bedding is blue and his pillows and all that kind of stuff. His room is also very messy when we see it in the first season, and I feel like that kind of reflects his mindset at the time, like in his like mental health, because when we see his room, it is when he's kind of in the middle of dealing with his parents' divorce, and, you know, being disobedient towards them. So kind of tidying his room and keeping it clean and pristine is probably not at the top of his priority list. And then when we see his room again in season 5, it's kind of changed to fit with where his character is now. And we see a lot more like gym equipment. He's got weights, he's got boxing gloves, he has a dartboard, and he also has like a mini fridge with a bunch of energy drinks and stuff in it. So I do like that they didn't just completely reuse the same set. They kind of adapted it to fit what Mike's room would look like a year later or 2 years later, or however much time has passed. And then lastly, for the Montgomery house, we have the bathroom, which is literally, I think, only seen once. But the bathroom is directly opposite Aria's room, like right across the hall, and it also has a door that joins it to Mike's room. And again, I feel like I'm being so repetitive with this one, but it is clutter central and I love it. It feels like a real family bathroom. Like we've got everyone's products all over the place. We've got body lotion, shaving foam, nail polish, little storage baskets, and like we've got the brown tiles in there, which again is like in keeping with that Montgomery color scheme. Their house feels very, even though it's kind of mismatched, it feels like still very cohesive. And you know, that kind of like, yeah, vintage style of house. And we also have the warm lighting again. So like I said, you know, it's nice, it's inviting. I just love this house. I love everything about it. And we also do see the basement from when Meredith like throws Aria down there, but like there's nothing really interesting in there to talk about. The British weather is just so terrible for filming in the winter because look at this lighting. Atrocious. So next we're going to move on to Emily's house, the Fields residence, and they live at 45 Serenity Lane, Rosewood, Pennsylvania, 19387. So in terms of location, Emily's house is directly next door to Toby's house, Toby and Jenna's house. I thought about doing them as well, but we only ever see like Jenna's room, so I felt like I didn't really have a lot to go off of. I mean, she has a lot of like snow globes in there and things that she's kind of like collected, but I don't know, I didn't really feel like enough to include them. And we don't see the outside of their house that much. We just kind of see Toby like sitting on the porch, but they are directly next door to Emily's house. And honestly, I literally walked into this house. Is that not insane? When I did the Warner Brothers tour, which is like one of my favorite things ever, if you ever get the opportunity to go and do it, 100%. As a Pretty Little Liars fan, it was so fun. But yeah, when we were like walking around and doing the tour, we literally got to go right up to Emily's house and walk in and like through, and it was so surreal. It was so crazy. So crazy. So I have like a little soft spot in my heart for this house. But to be honest, the exterior isn't my favorite out of all of them. I do think like the kind of like pastel of it is really cute. And I do like, again, like the porch kind of like Aria has, you know, these very like, I guess like suburban American style houses, like the ones we see in Desperate Housewives. I think those houses are so gorgeous. So out of all of them, it's not one of my favorites, but I do still really like it. Honestly, whenever I look at this house, I think about how A drove a car through the window. That's like the first thing that comes to mind. And also, they literally found Maya's body in the back garden of this house, so I feel like it's pretty cursed. The fact that, like, obviously Emily struggles with Maya's death, but they never actually discussed the fact that anytime Emily went into her garden, like, that was where her girlfriend was buried. Like, that is messed up. The fact that they like keep that house for so long, it's crazy. So firstly, we're going to start with the living room, which we don't see too often, but everything is very beige, which like it's a very muted neutral color scheme, which I feel like definitely lines up with Pam more than it does with Emily. I think it kind of fits her more conservative character, and I feel like it isn't really, you know, surprising that we don't see lots of bold colors or anything like that. It's all very like toned down. Everything is also very like meticulously placed. There is no clutter. Everything's exact. And as we know, Pam as a character is very, well, at least in the early seasons, is very like specific. She's very traditional, and she has a lot of focus on what other people think. I think it's in the pilot they're talking, and she's like, oh, you know, that behavior won't get you very far in Rosewood, talking about Aria being more like expressive, you know, with her clothes and everything. And Emily says, you know, not everyone dreams of making it in Rosewood. So we know that Pam has that kind of like very prim and proper, like wanting at least like her house and her family to look very presentable to everyone else in Rosewood. So yeah, I think the house kind of reflects that in a sense. And we do have a couple of family photos, but like I mentioned before, they're very like posed and like proper. They're not really like candid or like fun ones like we see in the Montgomery house. I feel like in a more stereotypical sense, Pam is kind of like a homemaker, you know, that kind of like housewife trope. She, in at least in the like earlier parts when we first meet her, isn't employed. She obviously then goes on to work at the police station, but her main kind of focus is Emily and is, you know, taking a lot of pride in her home and kind of like more neighborly activities. Like she obviously asked Emily to take that basket round to Myers because they've just moved in. It's very like home association, like suburban. I feel like that is really like Pam's whole, that's her whole shtick. And I do feel like because of this more like clean feel, it doesn't feel as homey. And I feel like that's kind of also reflected in the fact that the characters don't ever go there. The only time they're all at Emily's house, like in the living room, is when they're watching that thing on the news. And then obviously they had to be there because Toby's house was going to blow up next door. So that kind of made sense, like proximity wise. But they don't like chill out in Emily's living room like they do at Aria's. If they do go to Emily's house, it's like usually always to be in like her bedroom where it just feels a bit more like casual. So now moving on to the dining room. And like I said about Pam, you know, she takes a lot of pride in the house, but she also takes a lot of pride in like cooking nice meals for her family. So we see this like even when they just have dinner or breakfast, just the three of them, it's still like very nicely laid out on the table. They always sit at the dining table and that kind of vibe. Whereas with the Montgomerys, we do see them eat together as a family, but also we just see them sitting on the couch, like sharing takeaways or stuff like that. Whereas with Emily's, it always seems to be like, you know, this is proper, this is traditional, we're going to sit at the table and, you know, we're going to have the nice cutlery and the plates and everything. But then she does still take it up a notch even more when guests come over, like when Maya comes over for the first time, you know, she's got like the candles out, she's got the really nice tablecloth and the really like fancy plates compared to the ones they usually use and like a kind of flower centerpiece and stuff. Yeah, it's very like, come into my home, look how like nice and like well presented it is. So then we move into the kitchen, which is actually I think connected to the living room, but we only see it twice in the show, I believe, and both times that we see it, it does look quite different. So I think they are different sets, because yeah, the first one is like in the pilot, which obviously we know the pilot can how things look in the pilot can change quite a bit to the rest of the show. And I think the second time we see it is like season 6, so quite a lot of time had passed by then. So the kitchen we see in the pilot does feel a lot more homey, like it's, all the cabinets are wooden, it's like very like big and nice, and like there are some more kind of like, I guess, cluttery items. But to be honest, I would probably put this down more to like, you know, the kind of like growing pains of the pilot and not exactly knowing how everything is going to look or if the show's even going to be picked up. And then they kind of start to tailor the sets and stuff a bit more. So yeah, then the one we see in season 6, I feel like definitely fits the aesthetic of the Fields house and Pam's kind of design a lot more. There's a lot of like crystal and things, again, organized perfectly, and like baking touches. Like we see like a stand mixer to kind of show that Pam does make things by hand, which is the kind of thing you wouldn't really see anyone using in, say, the Marin household. They also have an attic, which we only see briefly, but it is where they kind of store like Wayne's old army uniforms, and there's also a safe up there that has his guns in it, which we see Emily go to when she's kind of trying to deal with the events of the dollhouse. She like goes up there, puts on her dad's jacket and things like that. So in terms of Emily's bedroom, I honestly think hers is probably the one that feels the least like her character and matches her character the least. We have like pale yellow walls and also a lot of like pale green, and they're not really colours I would associate with Emily. Like if I was going to do like a kind of color chart of what colors I think like kind of come to mind when I think of Emily. Pale yellow and pale green is not really two of them. And also I found it kind of interesting because yellow is associated with like comfort and, you know, optimism, that kind of like happiness, which I feel like is a kind of interesting parallel because in that first season, that's not how Emily feels in that room at all. Like she doesn't really feel comfortable in her own skin and being who she is in that room and like in that house. And she's not very like optimistic about how her relationship with her family will go once she has kind of spoken to them about who she is and the fact that she's gay. She's kind of like living in that uncomfortable state where she feels like her mum doesn't really accept her. So yeah, I thought that was kind of an interesting parallel with the fact that her room is like bright yellow, which is a colour that's really kind of associated with happiness and comfort. And then also similarly with the colour green, it represents like safety and honesty, both of which Emily again doesn't really experience while staying in that room. So to me, Emily's room kind of screams that Pam decorated it. Like that's the kind of vibe I get from it, is that she had like this idea of how she wanted the house to be, and this is how she decorated the room. And Emily has just kind of been able to add little things to personalize it, but ultimately not changed it that much. I mean, I know that obviously we see Pam like bringing in her freshly washed clothes and things. And I have a feeling that like when Emily isn't there, she still like tidies and makes sure everything is tidy. Like we don't see a lot of clutter or like misorganized things in there. It's all very like kind of regimented like the rest of the house is. And I also feel like the room looks like the kind of room someone a bit younger would have, maybe. I mean, I say that, but my room is yellow. But like, yeah, she's got like, you know, like the butterflies and florals, and I don't know, just for Emily, it doesn't feel like the kind of room she would have as a teenager. So I do wonder if that's kind of part of Pam trying to keep her as her little girl forever, or if like that's the room she had as a kid and they've just never changed it. I don't really know. It doesn't feel as expressive as say like Aria's room. She also does have like a really small kind of vanity on her dresser, but it matches her character a bit more because I feel like Emily, you know, we don't have like a lot of makeup up there. We have like just like a hairbrush, a couple of accessories, which does line up with her because I feel like out of all the liars, she probably wears the least makeup. It's kind of like a no makeup kind of look that she goes for most of the time. She doesn't really do like elaborate hairstyle. She'll either have it down or in a ponytail. So I like that that's kind of consistent with her character as well, that she isn't going to have as much like makeup and products on her desk as like Hannah or Aria would. She has some like photos of her friends and stuff which feel like that was her kind of personal touch on the room, and we also see her swimming ribbons and like trophies, like accomplishments, things like that. But I think that could easily be Emily or Pam that put that in there. So yeah, overall I feel like it's pretty like casual and understated. It doesn't really scream Emily. It has some sentimental items and gifts and things, but I think it would have been really cool to see Emily move out or have her own place in Rosewood in the time jump, because she goes from living in the Fields house to then living with Alison at her house. So I think it would have been kind of nice to see her in her own space and how she would have decorated it. So next up, we're going to be looking at Spencer's house, the Hastings house, or the Hastings Manor, as Wren called it. And they live at 23 Bridgewater Terrace, Rosewood, Pennsylvania, 19387. So in terms of the exterior, we actually always see the back of Spencer's house and not the front of it. So we're kind of just analysing like the back porch. And this house was actually also used as Lorelai and Rory's house in Gilmore Girls. And actually the front of the Spencer house went on to be the front of Mona's house later in the series. So yeah, that's kind of why we don't ever see it, because it's just not really, like, Spencer never leaves out the front. Like, everyone's always coming in the kitchen and going out to the barn. So you don't really need it. And then also they could then use it for something else. And this house is like beyond legendary. I feel like out of all the houses, it is easily the most iconic house. And again, on the Warner Brothers tour, we did get to see it, and I got my picture in front of it. And that was just really cool and really fun. to be able to kind of see it in person was so surreal, and like look at the house and then look back at the barn. I was like, I'm literally in an episode of Pretty Little Liars right now. This is so crazy. I feel like the house is very like picture perfect, kind of how you would expect the Hastings house to be. It's very old money feeling. In terms of location, it is obviously right next door to the De Laurentiis house. And I feel like with the barn included as well, it's probably the most expensive out of all of the Liars houses. But then also, I guess Mrs. D's body was buried there, so maybe that kind of brings the value down a little bit. Because I think you do have to disclose if someone died there, but also she didn't die there, she was just buried there, so maybe that's a bit of a Hastings loophole that they would use. But yeah, I do think it's probably the most expensive. In the books, it is actually like explicitly said this is an old farmhouse that was then converted to become like Spencer's house. And while they never say that in the show, I feel like with the inclusion of the barn and everything, it's kind of like a nod to that. So we can kind of maybe assume it's the same. So then we move on to the kitchen, which I think is probably maybe the most iconic set on Pretty Little Liars. I don't know if I can think of one that is more iconic than that, to be honest, because it is just featured so much and so much goes down there. I feel like it's legendary. So unlike the Montgomery house, the Hastings kitchen looks like nobody has ever cooked in it ever. I mean, there's like the island, they've got like little cubby holes underneath it. There's literally one like solitary thing placed in each one, like a vase or like a one cooking pot or some shit. Like it's all organized perfectly. Everything is for decoration. And on top of that, we never actually see the Hastings cooking. Ever. They just like take things out of the fridge, and I think Spencer does a microwave meal in there one time. It's always like, yeah, takeaways or like food from restaurants, just taking like stuff out of the fridge. For a kitchen that is like so gorgeous and so like fully kitted out, like they have the most expensive of every cooking item that you could need, but yet never use it. It's just for like display. The whole kitchen just screams wealth. I mean, they've got the marble countertops, they've got the huge island in the middle, like the huge fridge. It's very like, okay, we're working with good money here. So then with the living room, again, super iconic to the show. And the girls do hang out here like quite a bit, and obviously Spencer kind of like chills out in here and reads and like whatever, but it looks so uncomfortable. It looks insanely uncomfortable. I know they do hang out here, but I just don't understand how, because every piece of furniture in this living room and like the stools in the kitchen just seem like they would be so horrible to sit on. Like they just look like they were designed to look nice, but not actually to be sat on. They also have lots of like art and crystal like pieces and stuff in there that look, yeah, very like expensive and very tailored to the space. Everything matches really well, kind of in contrast to the Montgomerys, who look like they've more like collected things as they've traveled or like kind of just found it wherever. And I feel like this does kind of line up because obviously the Hastings are both lawyers. They live very busy lives. So looking after the home or decorating it or making it feel homey isn't really their top priority, because they don't actually spend a lot of time there. And kind of like Emily's house, well, not her room, but like the rest of the house is very beige, very polished, no kind of bold colors or anything like that. And I think this is the only house where I did not see a single family picture in like the kitchen or living room. There is zero sentimental stuff here, whatever, or personal touches or personality in this kitchen living room. It's just non-existent. We do actually see Peter's office. So it's kind of like through those double doors next to the kitchen, and then like on the left or something is his office. And it honestly looks exactly like you would expect a lawyer's office to look in like some fancy building. And it has a couple personal touches, like there are a couple of family photos, and we'll see like a golf ball on his desk. So there's like a couple of touches that show you that it's Peter's office. And he also has, I believe, I'm not exactly sure, but I think he has a Herman Miller chair, which basically is a very expensive office chair. The bathroom is such a crazy one because we only see it once, and it's in the scene where Spencer gets trapped in there with like the steam on really high. This bathroom is crazy even by Hastings standards. I feel like it's so bougie, so unnecessarily bougie. It's like this huge shower with these glass doors and like the marble and everything, and it's got like an electronic panel, and I think the settings on it say like bath, shower, steam. Like it's crazy, and you like sit down in there and Spencer's like doing a little steam room thing. Yeah, like compared to what we saw in the Montgomery bathroom, it's practically a spa. So yeah, a lot of their money seems to have gone into renovating this bathroom for some reason. And even like when we do get like a kind of glimpse at like the shelf bit, they've got like this huge big mirror that's like gold around the edge, and the shelves again have like different pieces of like expensive art looking sculptures and stuff on there, and like vases and things like that. Again, very like, this is exactly like they sent an interior designer in and was just like, just make it look rich. And that's it. So now we're moving upstairs to Spencer's bedroom. And this is kind of the first time in the Hastings house we see any sort of personality. I feel like her wallpaper and like carpet, they still feel very picked to go with the rest of the house. Like it's still in keeping with the color schemes of the house. But you have some more like personal flair. She's got like her books everywhere, and she's got her like sort of messy like wardrobe closet. We also do get some slightly more like out there, if you can believe it, choices for the Hastings house with like the pattern of Spencer's bedding and the furniture. You know, we see some fun kind of like patterns and textures. And I think specifically Spencer's like lounging chair, like her red chair that she has, is the exact opposite of anything we've seen in this house so far. I think my favorite part of Spencer's room though is probably her like desk, like that corner that has her desk in it, because we see so many like personal touches and colors that are more fun, and yeah, we just see a lot more of her personality shining in that corner. We see like her achievement bows. There's a picture of her with a horse. You know, her books are there. She's got like a huge pin board, like with all of her things she's doing and her schedule. And yeah, I don't know. I just think that little corner is so fun, and it really is just like, it's her in that space 100%. I also noticed next to her desk she has like her hockey gear, like her hockey, like is it field hockey or she plays in that first season. She has all that up there, so it seems like anything that could be construed as clutter, anything that has kind of like anything that's personal to anyone in the house, absolutely has to be confined to their rooms and cannot make it into downstairs. We're getting cozy, guys. Like it's the end of the day, the sun's going in. Let's just embrace the vibes of this lighting. Another touch that I really liked with Spencer's room was that I feel like it did grow with her, like as her character changed. So like I mentioned initially, she has kind of her like achievements everywhere. It's all very like, you know, her medals and her bows or whatever you call them. It's all kind of like focused around that. And then as, you know, the series goes on, I feel like we start to see more personal touches, like of her and Toby, or her and the girls, and Toby's like chair that he obviously makes for her. It kind of shows that shift between Spencer's character being super academic and achievement focused to then becoming more personal life and like the relationships in her life kind of taking more of a priority. In a deleted scene from season 1, if you want to go and watch my deleted scenes video, I really love that video. I thought it was really fun. So if you do want to go and like discuss the Pretty Lies deleted scenes, you can go over and watch that video. But in that, Spencer talks about how she wanted to take a class just like for a semester, I think, or something, for like extra credit. Or no, it wasn't for extra credit, it was just for fun, at Hollis College. And yeah, she wanted to do interior design because she thought that would be fun. And I feel like even though it was a deleted scene, that little like nod to her liking interior design, you can kind of see that in her room. She has, you know, more like, what would you say, like classic pieces. Like you've got her more antique oval, like big mirror that she has, and like her big canopy bed, and things that I feel like she would have been able to choose that she felt went together. And I don't know, again, I feel like it would have been fun to see her in her own space and how she would have decorated it. Okay, so lastly for the Hastings house, we have to talk about the barn, obviously. Now, I adore the barn. I love it. I love anything like that, like a barn conversion, a cottage. I just think like they're just so fun, like the style of build. And then you get like all the wooden beams and everything inside. I just think it looks really, really lovely. So when we first see the barn and the furniture and blankets and stuff, and then in between that like kind of scene and the present, it has been, you know, redone and turned into more of like an apartment style thing because Spencer wanted to live there in, is it senior year or a junior year? I can't remember, whatever it is. She like wanted to stay in the barn, and then Melissa and Ren ended up staying in the barn. So even though it's been decorated since season 1, we don't actually see the inside of it until 5 seasons later in season 6. And yeah, I think again, you know, Spencer helping design the barn and decorate it again gives a nod to her interest in interior design that I guess the writers thought about but then never really pursued. The kitchen I thought is really nice. Like the barn kitchen has a lot more character to it than the one in the main house. It's got like a really beautiful green window, and like it's got darker colors and plates and things and like accessories, and I just really liked the vibe. It's got like the wooden counter, and it's all very like warm toned, and yeah, really nice. And it feels just so much more cozy and inviting than the main house already, which is so crazy. You then have like the sliding doors that lead into the bedroom, and it's got like a kind of darker grey paint in there and a dresser, and it just felt very fitting for Spencer. I think it was nice to actually get to see her live in it when she came back after the time jump, after we knew how much she wanted to in season 1. But also I think that vibe of the barn just really fit her, like having that space to herself, whereas like everyone else, I guess aside from Hannah, kind of like goes back to their rooms, they're like childhood rooms. So I think it was nice to see Spencer in a completely different space. Okay, so now we're moving on to Hannah's house, the Marin house, and they live at 34 Turning Leaf Lane, Rosewood, Pennsylvania, 19387. The exterior of the Marin house I feel like is classic like American house, picture perfect white picket fence. Like it absolutely looks flawless from the outside, and it feels like the kind of place that would have just the most amazing like Christmas decorations, and very, yeah, I guess fitting of the fact that like when they moved in, her dad was like this kind of like hotshot lawyer. I'm pretty sure he's a lawyer. So he earns like a good amount of money, and it's a very like picture perfect family home, like the kind you would see, I don't know, in like a film or like an American Dream kind of thing. And for me, this house, when I first started watching One Tree Hill, Brooke's house that she lives in, her like childhood home, I honestly thought these were the same. Because they're both made by Warner Brothers, because I don't know, like when I pictured it, when I saw the house, I was like, oh my God, it's Hannah's house. It's not. I had to actually Google it to make sure they were different houses, and they are different, but they look identical. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny, because I feel like Brooke and Hannah like have quite a few similarities. And they're both like the girl that lives behind the red door. I thought that was so cute. And yeah, I feel like the Marin house was an interesting choice because it's completely different to all the other houses. It completely stands out from them. And in terms of location, the Marin house is actually directly across the street from the Montgomery house, which I thought was interesting because like the houses look nothing, the styles are nothing alike. But I think it's when like Byron goes over to Ashley's or something, he mentions that they like live across the street from each other.
We're here.
So looking at the kitchen, I feel like that's probably the most iconic room in the Marin household, the one that we like see the most. and it has a very like modern, clean aesthetic with a lot of black, white and grey. It feels very like show home, like no one actually lives here, it's just to show potential buyers because there's not really any personal touches to it. I mean, yeah, there's no like colour, and I think there's like the only thing is like there's a couple of pictures, like childhood pictures of Hannah on the fridge, but that's pretty much it. It seems like clear that the design of the house was completely up to Ashley to project, again, like a picture perfect, wealthy family vibe. And I also do feel like in the show she dresses quite like, I don't know, like business professional, I guess. She wears like a lot of blazers and blouses and things. So it kind of makes sense for her home to also reflect that. Black as a colour often represents like elegance and sophistication, and white represents cleanness, but also like a little bit of coldness, which makes sense because for a good amount of time, the Marin house wasn't really like a happy, like loving home with everything that went down with Tom. And grey can represent conservatism and seriousness. They also like make it a point to tell the audience that Ashley never cooks. They always ever get takeout. So it makes sense that like everything is clean and pristine because nothing really ever gets used. Now, the Marin living room is interesting. It's probably the one we see the least. I think we only see it twice in the show. So we don't really have a lot to go off of. Again, it seems to be very like purposefully designed. It's blue, which is kind of interesting. Doesn't really match like the aesthetic of the rest of the house, obviously, except for Hannah's room. And I did think though, maybe it's kind of like, I don't know, I thought it was kind of interesting as well because the two times that we see this room is when the characters, first Hannah and then Ashley, are both like feeling really sad about something. So, you know, it's only when they're in sad situations, and obviously blue as a colour is kind of synonymous with sad. Also, Hannah, the couch that Hannah's sitting on when she's having a like chunky monkey when she's watching the news, that feels fine, I guess, comfy enough. The couch that Ashley is laying on in that other scene, that looks like the most uncomfortable couch I've ever seen in my entire life. I was looking at it like, surely nobody bought this thinking it would be comfortable to lay on. Okay, guys, I just decided that it was getting too dark. So I was like, you know what? We're going to put pause on this and we're going to film it. We're going to finish it another time. So that's what we're doing right now. So we were talking about the Marin house. So then you go upstairs and they have the bathroom, which I'm pretty sure we only see one time, that at least I can remember. And it gives us the iconic Caleb scene with the shower. So I feel like it gets bonus points for that. But like I kind of mentioned, I'm not huge on the Marin house. It's just not really my personal style, my personal taste. But the bathroom I actually think is so cute. And I don't know why. Like, it feels a bit different to the rest of the house, but I just think it's adorable. I don't know. It gives me kind of like, I don't know, like Bridgerton. Like, it's all like pastel blue and like, it's just like the pattern of the wallpaper, and then you've got like the tile, and I don't know. I just actually really like it, which I wasn't expecting to. I didn't remember liking it, but then when I like remembered the episode and I found it to get like the screenshots and everything, I was like, this is actually pretty nice. And I also liked the attention to detail because obviously I just think it's so good. Like, I think it's so underappreciated, like the level of detail, because you could just throw any like random prop bathroom products in that, like, you know, in that scene, thinking no one's really going to look at it, but it's all very well chosen. It feels like a bathroom that a mother and daughter share. We've got like cute little containers for like the cotton pads and everything like that, and then all of the shampoos and the like skincare products. And I don't know, I just thought it was really well done. Like, when you look around it, you're like, oh yeah, Hannah and Ashley, they definitely share this bathroom together. So now we're moving on down the hall to Hannah's bedroom. And even though Hannah's bedroom isn't my particular style, like it's not what I would do, I actually love it. I love it. I think it is so cool in there. I think it is so cute. Like, it is. It's just like cutesy and fun, like she is in the early seasons. And I think actually her then wanting to paint, does she paint her room black, I think, or something after the dollhouse was really impactful because of how much I think her room represents her, and that like cute, bubbly, sweet, carefree kind of, girl that we meet in season 1. I think that room really reflects that. So then the fact that after the dollhouse she was struggling so much and she hated the room and she decided to like just paint over it and completely redecorate it, I think really was a really good way to show that inner struggle that she was having. So the colour scheme of Hannah's room is definitely like pink and purple, which I really loved. Like I said, I think it fits her personality really well. It fits Hannah's more like stereotypical girly aesthetic that she has, especially in the earlier seasons. And it's got like lots of fun patterns and colours, and I just think it's really, like just really bright and fun, just like how she is in that first season. So in terms of like the colour scheme, pink usually represents like femininity and love, which I just thought was just cute. And also we have a few little like pops of yellow, which like I mentioned before, yellow is kind of like happiness and optimism. And I think, with the rest of the house being very like kind of cold, like I said, like lots of like white and grey, I think it makes complete sense for Hannah to then, when given the chance to decorate her own room, make it just absolutely as fun as she can. We know that she's very creative and she's into fashion and design, so that for me makes complete sense to her. And also that she would make it a place that she really loved to be in and that was inspiring to her, because as we know, the Marin house wasn't a very good place for Hannah to be living. She was dealing with her parents' divorce and the fallout from that. And also, her struggle with being friends with Alison and not feeling confident within herself. And I think having that escape, I think she says to Aria in one episode, like she would just put her headphones on and like drown out her parents arguing all the time. So to have a room that felt like that had those bright colours, that had more of a fun tone to it as kind of like a bit of an escape from all of that, I think, is really well reflected in the kind of loud, fun side of Hannah's room versus the more like muted and more serious tone of the rest of the house. She also has quite a few like sentimental items. Like she has like a stuffed animal, and I think it's really cute because it's like a white fluffy dog. And I don't know if this was intentional, but in the books, Hannah has a little white dog. I think she's called Dot. So I thought if that was a little like callback to the books, and that was really cute. So yeah, she's got like stuffed animals, she's got pictures, she's got like lots of like fun cutesy stuff, and I think that kind of reflects how Hannah is one of the more, maybe even the most like emotionally driven of all the liars. She feels things very deeply and she cares for people very deeply. But also I do feel like she can be a little bit naive sometimes, like in the earlier seasons she can be quite childlike, which is very sweet and endearing. And I think the fact that she has those things in her room and doesn't care that they don't really match with her, like more teen magazines and everything like that is just, again, just a cute reflection of her character and her personality. It really feels like she decorated every inch of this room and it's exactly how she wanted it to be. And like I mentioned, she does love fashion. That's kind of what she goes on to do. And you can even see that in this room, like in its season 1, like in its earliest iteration, we've got like the fashion mannequins and the fashion magazines, and her desk is so cute, like her big vanity. And it makes sense that out of everyone, because she is the most interested in fashion and makeup, that she has this like really gorgeous vanity and like pink mirror, and it's covered in makeup and nail varnish, and I just love it. Loads of like little bottles of perfume and like products and hair stuff, and I love that it's not really any kind of rhyme or reason to it. Like it's all a bit messy. You could just kind of like picture her sitting there in the morning, getting ready for school, like doing her makeup and just choosing whatever she feels like. And that's the vibe I get. She doesn't buy these things for them to all look perfectly like harmonious. Is that a word? Homogenized? Wait. Basically, she doesn't buy things for them to all completely match and to be in a specific color scheme. She kind of just, it looks like she picks up perfumes or nail polishes or just whatever she feels like in that moment, and has just kind of collected those along the way. So that's the Marin house. We do see Ashley's room, like the tiniest little bit, like we don't even see her bed. It's just when Hannah goes in to like snoop through her wardrobe. So there's not really anything to tell about that, I suppose. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the De Laurentiis house, Alison's house, and they live at 29 Bridgewater Terrace, Rosewood, Pennsylvania, 19387. So in terms of the exterior, it's actually the same as, well, not the same as Aria's, but a similar story to Aria's, where they filmed the outside. You know, that scene when Emily goes to give Maya the basket, they filmed that in Vancouver. So then obviously when they moved back over to the Warner Brothers lot, they had to change the outside of her house. And actually with the exterior, it was across the street from the Montgomery house. So when Emily and Maya are walking, you could actually see the Montgomery house in the background because they were direct neighbours in the pilot. But then obviously, as we know, that then changes from the next episode, and Spencer and Alison are direct neighbours, and then obviously Aria and Hannah live across from each other, and then like over on a different street wherever. I don't think they live that far from each other, like they're all seem to be in like walking distance, but then they do also drive like to each other's houses quite a bit, so I'm not really sure. But then obviously, yeah, Emily like lives wherever she lives and is across from Toby, so that's kind of the way things are laid out. And then Mona's house, I have no idea what that is because it doesn't have an actual address. I feel like this house is beyond iconic purely because of the night that Alison disappeared. I think the most like legendary house and the one you associate with Pretty Little Lies is definitely Spencer's house. But I think just for everything that went down there that night, this house is iconic. It's also our third house to have a body discovered there. So that's like 3 out of 6 that have had a body buried at their house. So that's a bit intense. And I mean, I guess technically Mona's, but then that was staged, so like not really. But yeah, these houses, they would be a tricky sell, I think, to prospective buyers. But her house has like a kind of creepy vibe to it, honestly. Like the outside of it, I feel like it's quite dark. Like it's often really like dimly lit. It has a lot of like trees and like greenery kind of like surrounding it, so I guess that kind of links to the kind of mysteries that go on there and the dark undertones of the De Laurentiis family. And Maya literally says, oh, I'm new girl that moved into dead girl's house, and like it gives dead girl's house vibes. Like it is kind of eerie from the outside. So as we move into the interior, we're going to look at the living room. And for me, I'm focusing on how it looked pre-time jump, because Alison's house is really the only one that changes, like at least drastically, with the time jump. She has redecorated, everything is like completely different to how we saw it. So I'm not really going to be looking at any of that. I'm more looking at pre-time jump, the more like iconic version of the house that we know. Also as well, because the other houses haven't changed, it's not really fair to compare like the old houses and what they were supposed to mean and represent for those like early versions of those characters to the late versions of those characters, when Alison's the only one that gets like an updated kind of house, if that makes sense. And also just kind of like selfishly, I have a whole thing about Alison after the time jump. I will do a video on it, but for me, that is not Alison De Laurentiis, and I think they really butchered her character, and it was such a shame because Sasha is just incredibly, incredibly talented and could have done so much with the Alison De Laurentiis character if the writers had just let her. And to me, that season 6, well, like season 6 and season 7 Alison don't represent her character that well. So I don't really want to like compare her character and like that version of her house, because to be honest, that version of her house is boring. It's like beige. There's literally nothing that screams Alison about it at all. Whereas I do feel like the earlier house, I just have a lot more to talk about there. So in terms of the De Laurentiis house, it does not feel homey at all. It feels incredibly cold. The whole of the living room is blue. So again, we're working with that more cold color, that not really like welcoming kind of vibe. I mean, even after, obviously it would have been weird for the girls to hang out there while Alison had disappeared, but they still don't really hang out there after she's back either. So I think the De Laurentiis house just has a bit of a weird vibe that they're not going to like go and hang out there, because it just, it feels cold. It doesn't feel, it doesn't feel welcoming. And I feel like it feels pretty haunted as well. I think it's haunted by obviously like Alison's death while she's gone, but then also like Jason's struggles in that house, and Charles like obviously having lived in that house and then being taken away, and the breakdown of Kenneth and Jessica's marriage, and then ultimately Jessica's death. I feel like that house is just surrounded by sadness. In terms of design though, I think the living room has Jessica De Laurentiis written all over it. Nobody had any say in that living room. It just has Jessica written all over it. It's definitely designed to look very like lavish and rich. We've got like golds, and like the sofa just looks very like, I don't know, like if you went on The Sims and you like scroll down to the most expensive sofa, that is what you would find. And I just feel like it feels very Jessica. We do have, one interesting thing is we do have some sentimental items like family photos, but if you look, unless I just couldn't see them, I think the only family photos are ones of Alison, which does line up with kind of how Jason talks about his childhood, that it was very different for him than it was for Alison, and there always seemed to be them favouring Alison over him. And I think it's interesting that they kind of chose to do that and only put up pictures of Alison and not like childhood pictures of Jason. We also have the grand piano, which kind of obviously represents wealth. Those are very expensive, like pride of place in the living room, so anyone who visited would obviously see it. And also I think kind of paints a picture of Jessica as that kind of parent that would force their child to like have a hobby like that like looks very impressive to anyone else. And we see that Alison does play it a little bit, and then she kind of, I think, gives up on it like when she comes back. So that could maybe, have something to do with it. Now, the only other room we really have to talk about is Alison's room. We don't see Jason's room or the parents' room. I think we see like the pantry, but again, there's just not really a lot to talk about there. But Alison's room, again, not my personal style, but I really love it, and I think it is just so her. Like, it is so Alison. Like, the Alison we see in the flashbacks, like, she 100% lives in this room. Do you know what I mean? It's her to a T. It has a kind of like pink Parisian vibe to it, very like quintessential it girl, popular girl kind of room. I think the fact that her room is all pink is quite fitting. It's like I said, a very feminine colour, but it also represents love, which I think Alison lacks across the series and is almost like searching for. I know that she has like quite a cold exterior, but they do kind of hint at her being a hopeless romantic on the inside, like with her love of Breakfast at Tiffany's and her love of Paris, the city of love. And also I think pink obviously is a great choice because of another 2000s mean girl, Regina George. So I think pink becoming kind of synonymous with that like blonde mean girl type, then definitely as a little nod to that, it made complete sense to make Alison's bedroom pink. And I think the Paris flair to it makes complete sense. She's got like I think she's got like little Eiffel Towers, everywhere, and just kind of like that like Parisian feel and design, because it's something that's brought up quite a bit in the show that she, talks to Emily about going to Paris, and it's quite a common theme. And it seems to be something that, you know, is very kind of aspirational to her. I think she dealt with a lot. Like, obviously she is mean to a lot of people, but I think she also dealt with a, you know, difficult home dynamic, and also like being approached by these creepy men. Like, she had a relationship with Wilden and Ian when she was like 14, 15. So her having this room that's kind of like a bit of an escape, or like almost like a fantasy world. Like, she kind of lived in this fantasy world where she was the main character. I think Spencer says like it's Alison's movie and we're all just like, you know, acting in it or something like that. And I think that's really true of Alison's character. You know, she is very much, in her world, the main character. She is running everything and she lives in a bit of a fantasy version of life. So then having that Paris feel and like the lavish, like princess, you know, bed. Yeah, it looks like the kind of bed like a Disney princess would have. So I think she's kind of trying to build that vision of like how she wants life to be. And she kind of uses her room as like almost like the backdrop for that. I feel like with obviously like Mrs. D designing the rest of the house and Alison kind of being the apple of her eye, it definitely makes sense to me that she completely let Alison take the reins and design this room, which I think is why it fits her personality so well. Whereas like with Emily's, I think hers fits less because you get the vibe that Pam decorated it. I think her room also has an interesting vibe because it's got like two kind of vibes to it. In some senses, it feels a bit young for Alison. You know, like it's almost stuck at 15, kind of the age where she disappeared. Like with the music boxes and the ballerinas, it feels kind of like a younger person's room a little bit in some aspects. Which kind of makes sense that she would maybe want to hold on to a time that felt easier for her when she was like a kid. But then also parts of the room do feel quite mature. And obviously that then makes sense for Alison's character because she seemed so much older than she was in terms of her intelligence and her scheming. So yeah, I think having that, she's young, but she has a really like mature way about her, and or at least she thinks that she does, but then can be like in over her head about things. Again, I think is like reflected in that room with those kind of like, oh, it's pink and it's kind of like princessy and cute, how you would expect a younger girl's room to be, but then she also has all her like hiding places and she has art in there, and you know, she like reads Lolita and things like that. So it's kind of like two sides of the coin. Yeah, I think the only other room we see is the attic, and obviously it's like full of Alison's old things, which again makes sense because Jessica had mentioned to Emily before that she didn't want to really get rid of anything that was Alison's. But aside from that, that's kind of it for this house. And then last but not least, we have the Vanderwall house, so Mona's house. And like I said, there's no actual like street or exact number or address for this house. So it's kind of like hard to tell where it is. I would assume it's probably like closer to where Hannah and Aria live, because I kind of got the vibe that like her and Hannah would see each other a lot and they would like walk around like town together. So I feel like maybe their houses are quite close together as well. So the exterior of this house I think is so cute. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorites. And like I mentioned, I think I mentioned earlier, this is actually the front of Spencer's house. So when you like go on the Warner Brothers tour, if you go through this door and like walk through to out the back, then like and turn around, it's the back of Spencer's house. So I guess, yeah, they must have just thought, well, we haven't used it for Spencer, so let's go and use it for Mona. And it's so funny because even just the way that it's painted and the feel of it, it does feel like two separate houses, even though it's like technically the same house. It's also the last addition to the houses. We only see it in seasons 4 and 5. So it's relatively new, and also we don't really have a lot to talk about because we don't see a lot of it. We only see the living room and Mona's room. So in terms of the living room, like I said, we don't see a lot of it. I think we only see it in like 2 or 3 episodes. And also we don't really know a lot about Leona, who would have been like who's Mona's mum, that would have like decorated the house, whereas with Pam and Ashley, I kind of know their characters more, so I can see their characters in the design, but with Leona, we don't really know a lot about her. But some of the things I did pick up on was that we see a lot of red in Mona's living room, which is interesting because it's not a colour that really shows up in any of the other girls' houses. And red is a colour that obviously does have like positive things, but it also represents danger and anger and chaos. And all of these emotions kind of line up with what Mona was feeling when we see her house. She is, you know, angry at Alison and she is kind of fearful of that. And Mona as a character is kind of a bit chaotic at times with not knowing whether if you can trust her or not. And in the scene where we are in her living room, that's exactly what they're talking about, is their fear of Alison. And also it kind of is almost foreshadowing in a way that this room has so much red in it because ultimately Mona was in danger. This is I think the episode after this is when she is, you know, abducted by A and they have the blood everywhere. And so that kind of like ties in together, I feel like. And then lastly, we have Mona's bedroom. So again, we only see this a couple of times, but it is bright green, which is not really what I would have expected for Mona. Or maybe, I don't know, she has like really bright colours in her outfits in the earlier seasons. So maybe. But yeah, like I mentioned previously, you know, green represents honesty and calm and well-being, which again is kind of contradictory to Mona's character. Mona she's scheming and she's determined and she's quite mysterious. So this kind of like bright, calming, honest colour doesn't really match up with that, considering that she literally was A for 2 seasons and lied about it. Her room kind of does feel like her though, in the sense of like what she has in it. You know, she has a lot of like antique-y things. She has this antique phone and she has these dolls that obviously she loves because they're very similar to the dolls that A gave to the girls. And obviously that doll shop where she would visit, I assume she gets like a lot of them from there. We've got like books and other things. So yeah, I think it did feel quite her. But the thing I found the most interesting is that I actually think this bedroom is very similar to Alison's, just with a different kind of colour scheme. It's kind of like Alison's room, but just green instead of pink. And I kind of wonder if that reflects how much Mona wanted to be Alison. Like she wanted to be her friend. And then when Alison was gone and she had gotten rid of her, she wanted to step into that like more like, you know, like it girl role. You know, she's got like the Paris bed sheets and the fashion magazines and things that just feel very Alison. I thought that was kind of an interesting parallel between their 2 rooms. Okay, so now I'm going to rank the houses. So in number 6, I have Hannah's house, which probably isn't a surprise because for me, like I said, it's just not really my design. Like the outside of it is probably my least favorite, and same with the inside. The only room I really like is Hannah's and kind of the bathroom, but if I was like looking around these and gonna buy one of them, Hannah's would almost be an instant no. At number 5, I have Alison's because I do kind of like the outside of her house, but then like the inside, like I said, it's very Mrs. De Laurentiis and I don't like the living room, but I do think that Alison's room is cute. At number 4, I have Mona, purely because of the outside of her house. I love, love, love the outside of her house. It is just picture perfect and I just think it would be so cute to live there. I also do quite like her room, but I'm not too fussed about the living room. At number 3, I have Emily, which while the exterior of her house is not my favorite, I do still like it. I do think it's cute with the little porch. I love her kitchen, like especially if we're talking about the kitchen from the pilot, absolutely gorgeous. And like her, you know, dining room is nice and her bedroom is cute with like the yellow. My bedroom's yellow, so yeah, I do like this one. And at number 2, I have Spencer's house. It's beyond iconic. I think it's just fun because of how iconic it is. I absolutely love the kitchen. It's one of my favorite sets in Pretty Little Liars. And I do love Spencer's room as well. And obviously it's just huge. And you get the barn with it and like this gorgeous garden and the fancy shower. I mean, it just screams money. I just love it. And then at number 1, it's probably no surprise to anybody, but I have Aria's house because, well, Aria's my favorite liar, so I feel like I was already a little bit biased there. But I just think this house is everything that I would want in a house if I was buying a house. It is cozy and warm, and all the like wood accents I really love. You know, you've got like the cozy living room, and Aria's room is just everything. It's my favorite room out of all of the girls. I just adore it. And yeah, I don't know, just everything about it. I just absolutely love that house. I would move into it in an instant. So that is it for today's video and looking at the houses of all the Pretty Little Liars. Please tell me in the comments which house is your favorite. Is there anything that you noticed in the rooms, or, you know, in these houses that I didn't pick up on, or that you kind of have a theory about or think this is why they did it? That would be really fun to discuss in the comments. Which house do you think is the ugliest? We can also discuss that too. And yeah, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.